So if we can start with our warm up. So yesterday was Twitter day. And so my questions, I have a couple of them. Do you use Twitter? And if you do, like, who do you follow? If you guys want to tell me about that. Sorry, it's going to be me and a lot of hot tea. Yes, Angeline?
I used Twitter for well, as shameful as it may be, I use it to get show updates. So I follow the Criminal Minds revival, and I follow they have their own Twitter account, so I follow that. And then I also follow this SWAT, just so I can get I don't want to say spoilers, but just so I know when the new episode's coming, because I hate not being in the know. So
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. That works. All right. What about the rest of you? Adriel, you have your hand up.
I don't use Twitter because from what I've seen, it's a bit little toxic. When I mean little, I mean it's really toxic. Like I yeah, it's a bit toxic.
on
Well,
social media,
So that just makes me not use Twitter or any social media except for YouTube.
okay. Gabriel, I see you're saying the same thing. You're not allowed to have any social media except for YouTube. All right. Okay, Samuel, you don't use it until what you were going to, and then you found out that Elon Musk bought it, so then you decided not to. I'm a little confused. And then Jamarcus, did you raise your hand? Ah, okay. Did you have did you want to tell us something, Jamarcus? So I don't use Twitter, mainly because as a teacher, I cannot set privacy settings on Twitter. So my other social media is all private, which means
yeah, that's what I do on all my social medias.
even if a student finds me on other forms of social media, you guys can't get into my social media, etc. But Twitter, I can't separate that out. And so it's just really not a good for me. I don't want my students in my social media, and I don't want to know about their social media, if that makes sense. I think that's a boundary that needs to stay. So I mean, I have friends who use it and they tell me about, things that are happening on Twitter. Um, like Angeline, you were talking about Criminal Minds. Criminal Minds also has an Instagram page.
Yeah, I follow them on Instagram too. You could say I cyber stalk because I check every day because I can't not know what's going on in the show.
I follow them on that. More inappropriate than toxic. Okay. I mean, I think part of that too is maybe people that you follow. Um, how people, the people that you follow, what they post, all of those, have they can like your feeds, and every social media has feeds. So and yes, I think, Samuel, I agree with you. Everything has gotten more toxic because I call it keyboard warrioring. People get behind a keyboard and they will say and do things that they would not normally do in person. And so you see a lot of that with social media today, even more so than it was way back when. Yes, they do. They do, Taj. I agree with you. I agree. Because most people don't or cannot seem to help themselves. Like if I see something I don't agree with, it's keep scrolling. I mean, because I have friends of
Yes.
everything you can imagine, religious, political, everything. And if I don't like something they post, I just scroll. Like, I don't need to say or do, like, I don't have to interact with that particular post. I just continue on. But a lot of people can't seem to help themselves, I guess. Yes, cancel culture does rely on Twitter. That seems to be a big part of it. Yeah. A lot of bullying. So the thing with using the term racist, Jamarcus, and I will tell you this, is when I was your age, somebody being called racist meant something. It was very harsh and cruel and a horrible thing. Today, racist literally has become to mean I don't like what you're saying, period. Like, your age group and the group right above you have overused it so much and so badly that you have literally taken what it meant and just it doesn't hold the power that it did. Adriel, you raised your hand, and Annalisa, we're not going to talk about the TikTok assignment until next time. Okay.
Um, I don't know if I could say this word in class but also I think there's a lot of, I don't know if I can say this word, keto, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Lots of ketos on Twitter. That's a bit, that which is a little concerning. I have no idea how you have these drugs kids.
Yeah.
That's what like the main concern about social media is that it's a lot of adults using it. So I follow the accounts that I follow, like the cast of TV shows and stuff like that, and I only look at their pages, no one else's, because I'm afraid.
Well, and that's good that you are being smart and how you are using your social media. You're a rarity. A lot of kids, and I say kids, just don't use social media in the right way, or their parents aren't involved in how they're using social media. You have to be very careful with that. And I think Chet Game.
Are you signed in?
I don't have social media.
You don't have social media, Jameson? Okay. And that's perfectly okay, right? Um, the TikTok. Okay, Annalisa, give me a minute and I will go through there. Okay. So I understand. Like, for a lot of you guys, and this is something, at first, the first time I thought about it, I was like, oh, I don't know, Twitter, you guys are 8th graders. And then I talked to my nieces and nephews, and they're like, oh, I have a lot of friends, and I have one that's in 8th grade, and she's like, she's not allowed to use it, but she has friends who use it. And I was like, oh, okay, well then I guess I will ask my students about that, because for me, I did not think that you guys would have that, if that makes sense. I did not think it would be something that would be part of what you guys were doing. So that was like, so I was like, oh, I think I will ask. Now, is there a way that you could use social media for a positive? Think about what we've been learning about in module 8, change over time.
I
Spreading.
don't really know. I mean, yeah, people can be positive, but they also throw in their own opinions. So I feel like, I don't know. I feel like there's no win if you're trying to like spread positivity throughout social media, because there's always going to be someone being like, oh, well, that's your opinion. How about you keep it to yourself? Or people are going to spread their own opinions in like comment sections and stuff. So I don't really see the win.
I mean, yeah, you're probably going to have that, because that's society today. But we do know that social media is how information does get spread. Like the Arab Spring, when you had a lot of them protesting in Arab nations, they predominantly used social media to get the word out, to do what they wanted, you know, to get information out, to deal with that. So there is a way you can do it, you know, positively. I mean, yes, I understand it's stuff in your comments, it can be scams. I mean, part of that is going to also be in your settings. I'm just thinking drama over a sandwich. Exactly. I'm just thinking, so we've been talking about Australia, right? And change over time in the lesson that we've been working on. And their biggest thing has been climate change, right? So could we use social media, or could the people in Australia use social media? Think of it as like maybe starting a trend. So I think one of your questions, your writing activity, is asking you about whether or not like what you could do to make things better. So could that not be something, right? And they have been, some people have been starting that. So there are some things that are working in that direction, right? So it's just, you know, I know there's a lot of negativity. I know there's a lot of issues. It's just something I wanted you guys to think about. Well, I'm glad that you're here, Nisa. All right, so if you have not already done so, can you open up your Module 8 Lesson 4 journal and the course arc so we can finish it, please? Okay, can you guys give me, I see Ryan's open. Can you guys give me a thumbs up when you've got them open? We're going to the Google Maps, the Google Map tour. All right, so remember in the Google Map tour, you guys have to click on the link and it actually takes you to the map. And so the countries we're talking about in here are obviously the Pacific, right? Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, the Marshall Islands, Samoa, and Kiribati. Okay. All right. So what does it say about Australia? So it talks about, like most industrialized nations, it has pressing environmental problems. Most Australians live in the fertile coastal communities that surround the harsh outback. So the whole center and most of the western portion of Australia is the outback. It's desert. Most people live all along in the eastern coastal regions and on the western coast, because the rest of Australia is just harsh, if you will. The outback, which is known locally as the bush, basically has, even though real estate developers have started like constructing businesses and houses on the land that served as wildlife habitat in this region. Yes, so in Nevada, you have Clark County in the south, and then of course you have the northern region, right, near Reno and Carson City. And then there's a few in between in the center. Exactly. Exactly. And because Brandon, I needed to change the date and it's now due on the 29th. We're going to do it together as a class. So it's been changed and I apologize for that, but thank you guys for calling that to my attention. I thought I had gotten that fixed, but it is now changed. TikTok's not going to be due until the 29th. So we've got a little bit of time, okay? So they're talking about, you know, the droughts that are taking place. They called one the millennium drought, which was from 1996 to 2010. That's a 16-year drought. That's pretty harsh, right? They are, of course, like they're saying all of these things are because of global climate change, right? Let me see what else. And then, of course, they're talking about in the ocean, overfishing has depleted the fish stocks. Chemical pollutants have, basically contributed to the loss of marine life. They're talking about increasing ocean temperature. So definitely we're talking about the climate change, right? And how it's affecting Australia. Okay, in New Zealand, it's talking about 90% of New Zealand's lakes and rivers meet swimmable water quality standards, or at least that is their goal, is to clean up their water in New Zealand. Let's see, they're talking about they've had a problem because of frequent heavy rains, which spread sediments and chemical contaminants. So they're talking about like agricultural fertilizers, contaminants taking place, and that being spread because of the increasing amount of rain. Remember, we talked about that in the Pacific and how that has become an issue, one of the changes in our climate. There's been a loss of wetlands, which the wetlands were kind of the filter between the area and then the water. And the wetlands would be the filter to clean everything out, but not having the wetlands means nothing cleans it out. So then it gets to the lakes and the rivers and it hasn't been cleaned. And that's what they're talking about with that. Their air quality, because they've been working very hard on it with vehicle emissions, they're getting better. They're trying to convince the rest of their population that wood and coal burning stoves and furnaces, they need to get better ones, which has been kind of an issue. The Marshall Islands. Sorry, guys, killing my throat. Remember we were talking about the Marshall Islands and how the rising waters was infringing onto the islands. Remember, they actually had to move one whole group of people out of the way. So rising sea levels, which of course is destroying, a lot of the islands. People are having to move, etc. Samoa, which is America Samoa and Samoa, they have been very proactive. They rely on agriculture, fisheries, forestry, tourism, and international aid. So they've worked really hard to prepare for and reduce the effects of climate change. Sorry. So one of the things that they have been doing is basically because they've gotten funding from the United Nations Development Program, they've worked on reducing the impact of flooding from their river system. It's talking about like drainage systems. They've had a surveillance system to help track health problems related to the floods. They did in 2017 the World Symposium talking about the 2 Million Trees program, where they were planting more and more trees. And then the last one, Kiribati, it's literally just 6 feet above sea level. So think of a really tall guy or a tall girl, right? That's all the difference between sea level that this island is. Any amount of rising sea levels, obviously, Kiribati is going to be pretty much destroyed, right? They're talking about South Tarawa, which the island's most densely, well, one of their most densely populated islands, because it's an archipelago, could be underwater by 2050. And then 80% of North Tarawa could be underwater by then as well. So one of the issues that they have been dealing with is, what do? We have to deal with the reef damage that's caused around the island. They've been building seawalls. They've been working on water management plans. A lot of this stuff doesn't seem to really be working. So I'm not sure what they're going to do other than the fact that Australia and New Zealand have been allowing what they're calling climate change refugees from Kiribati and Tuvalu to come to their countries. So what can we put for our Google Map tour? How do all these points relate to the topic of the lesson? And what do they have in common? Can you guys give me, you can unmute if you would like. Anybody? I mean, we know these are all islands in the South Pacific. Are facing numerous issues related to climate change, heavy rains have caused pollutants to flow into freshwater rivers and lakes in New Zealand. Long-term droughts have, I know everybody did seem to go quiet, right? I asked for them to give me an answer and everybody went quiet. Long-term droughts have made the bush in Australia more flammable, causing massive brush fires in diseases, endangering the wildlife. There have been more diseases spread due to, what would we say, flooding? Rising ocean levels. Does that work? Do we need to add more? All right.
No, I think it's good.
You think it's good? All right. So there we go. That's what we have for our Google Map tour. All right. So let's come back to our course arc because we have questions. So only about 6 feet above sea level, very vulnerable to rising sea levels. Which one is this? Kiribati. Good. Okay. Very proactive government when it comes to dealing with climate change. Oh, awesome. Look at you throwing that in there really fast. Samoa, yes. Expected to be under the ocean by the end of the century. Definitely the Marshall Islands. And that was something we talked about earlier. Set a goal to have all rivers and lakes swimmable. New Zealand. Suffers from overfishing and pollution in the waters. Australia. Okay, does everybody have that done? Yes, Jameson?
Each player.
If so, is it a problem that I did almost all the course arcs for this semester and the rest of them?
No, it's fine. Just make sure that they're all passing grades, okay?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. As long as you're then you're kind of working through the journals with us, because those are the summatives, and you're good. Now you're ahead of the game. All right, so are we good? Can we move on to the writing activity, guys? Yeah? Okay. All right, so, oh, I don't know if I can read all of this, guys. My throat is really hurting. They're talking about climate change can require like many solutions. There's no magic bullet. Most of them hinge on humans changing the way that we behave. Oh, Ryan, you want to read it out loud for us? That would be awesome. That would be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Addressing climate change will require many solutions. There's no magic bullet. Yet, nearly all the solutions exist today, and many of them hinge on humans changing the way we behave, shifting the way we make and consume energy. The required changes of span technologies, behaviors, and policities that encourage less waste and smarter use of our resources. For example, improvements to energy efficiency and vehicle fuel economy, increases in wind and solar power, biofuels from organic waste, setting a price on carbon, and protecting forests from all the potent ways to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide and other gases trapping heat on the planet. Scientists are also working on ways to
Sustainably.
sustainably produce hydrogen, most of which is currently derived from natural gas to feed zero emission fuel cells for transportation and and electricity. Other efforts aimed at building better batteries to store renewable energy and engineering a smarter electric grid, capturing carbon dioxide in power plants and other sources to store it underground to turn it into valuable products such as gasoline. Some people argue that nuclear power, despite concerns over safety, water use, and toxic waste, should be a part of the solution because nuclear plants don't contribute to any direct air pollution while operating. While halting new greenhouse gas emissions is critical, scientists also have emphasized that we need to extract existing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. More m- more fanciful ideas for cooling the planet, so-called geoengineering schemes such as spraying sunlight reflecting aerosols into the air or blocking the sun with a giant space mirror. Many largely been dismissed because they pose more environmental risks than proven beliefs. But planting trees, restoring seagrasses, and boosting the use of agri- uh, agriculture cover crops could help clean up significant amounts of carbon dioxide, restoring forests already chopped down in Brazil. For example, you could draw about 1.5 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide out of the air, and a research study published at the National Academies of Science estimate the world's forests and farms could store 2.5 gigatons. Those are relatively modest numbers, given historic carbon dioxide emissions of 2.2 trillion metric tons, but every contribution is needed curtail the world's current trajectory.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So all of those are like large things, right? So our question prompt is, what can be done to help these regions? So we're talking about Oceania, right? Australia, New Zealand, the islands. It must be said that by helping these regions with the issue of climate change, we will help ourselves as well. So the question that you have is, what can be done to help these regions? And if you click on this link, it takes you to this site. And it's like, you know, what can you do to help these areas? And that is what we're supposed to be answering for our writing activity. So I want you guys are going to look through this one. And I am going to play, I have a video on climate change for Australia that I wanted you guys to see. And then we'll come back and hopefully you're listening to the video and you're thinking about what you can actually write for your writing activity on the journal. At this point, we are actually done with the course arc itself, which means you can hit submit and the course arc is done. Okay. I'm going to play the video. You guys are going to be thinking, and then we're going to come back and you guys are going to tell me what we're going to put for the writing activity. Okay. All right. Let me hit play. Oh, wait, let me do closed caption and then play.
How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions?
The word urgent is totally applicable to the current crisis that we're in because countries are simply not getting the job done.
You interfere with Mother Nature, this is what you get.
Climate change is now much more dangerous than we had predicted 5 to 10 years ago.
Science is there. You know, you got to believe the facts and you got to do something to help us.
Australia is on the front line of climate change. We're already experiencing climate change-related natural disasters on a hot, dry continent, with some communities experiencing rising sea levels. But you see, Australians of all kinds are rising to meet the existential threat of our times.
This whole island, Masig, is our library. It has knowledge, it has history, has ancestral connection which ties us back to this land. Masig is our maternity ward. This Masig is our hospital. This island is our supermarket. It provides us with our food, it feeds us, it gives us shelter.
For these Torres Strait Islanders, time is running out. Rising sea levels, more extreme weather and coastal erosion are consuming some of the 17 inhabited islands where Indigenous people have lived for thousands of years.
The weather never used to be like this. So you see, probably in the last 10 years, I've seen about 20 meters of land being washed away.
Weather patterns lately has been quite abnormal. With the king tides that's been coming into our community, I haven't seen anything like that before.
The water come into the community
And I was thinking of the future generations, how we go survive.
Scientific modelling suggests the sea level here could rise by 80 centimetres by the end of this century. That would mean the kinds of devastating weather events that normally occur once every 100 years could hit low-lying islands like Boigu every few days.
At this point, we're not going to eliminate catastrophic climate change impacts entirely. Some of them we're already dealing with, but we can prevent the worst impacts from playing out if we act boldly within the next decade. If we fail to do that, then we will start to see those worst case scenarios play out, and that means substantial flooding of low-lying islands and coastal regions of Australia.
Boigu Island priest Stanley Marama is one of 8 Torres Strait Islanders who accuse the Australian government of failing to address the climate impacts that threaten their homes. They've taken their case all the way to the UN Human Rights Committee in Geneva.
Government should help us right now, not tomorrow, not next year.
Because of the impacts and the effects of climate change, we believe that our human rights are being violated.
Our clients' islands are between around 3 and 10 metres above sea level, so they're particularly vulnerable to the impacts of sea level rise.
Hey, I'm in the camera. Look for Peter.
Boigu Island is the island I love. We live here and we die here. Our grandfathers and fathers die here, mothers, grandmothers. This is our home. And this is our cemetery. End part of the island, western point, and the lowest part. And we worry about the loved ones. It's scary when water rises. Climate change happens now. It's happening now.
How much the world warms in coming decades could determine whether the cultural traditions of the Torres Strait survive. The average global temperature has already increased 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels. It's set to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next 20 years, if we continue on the current path.
Australia has already experienced a year of 1.5 degrees, which was in 2019 when we experienced the Black Summer bushfires and mass bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef. So we have a taste of what is to come. And the imperative for us is to now say the temperature is rising, it's rising extremely quickly, and we're seeing the consequences all around us.
Around Australia, scientists point to 17 different ecosystems which they say are in danger of collapse, with climate change posing the greatest single threat to vulnerable species and habitats. In the east of the Torres Strait, Yese Mosby says climate change has made his island home an increasingly desolate place.
The reef outside, it looks like a desert, is full of sand. You go to the area where you know where you'll pick up abundance of shellfish and stuff like that. You have to go further. It's all covered in sand. Our ancestors survived off drinking fresh water along the wells they dug out through this island. Now most of the wells are near the shorelines now. They used to be inland. This water here it's not drinkable.
Wash up to the church bell. It was down the road, but it was all along there and all along here. I thought we were going to lose this coconut tree.
Masig resident Hilda Mosby hopes that building higher seawalls will protect the island, at least in the short term. As they wait for construction to start, there are days when locals here struggle to keep the rising sea from inundating the community.
It is nerve-wracking. You go to sleep, but you don't sleep. Will you be here tomorrow? Well, we're doing everything we can to stay where we are.
Unfortunately, the science tells us that in the coming decades, some of these island communities will become uninhabitable and have to be relocated. Planning for that needs to really begin now.
It's going to be so traumatizing. It's really scary to think about that. We're Australians, and if this happens, we'll be climate change refugees in our own country. How can that be possible?
Torres Strait Islanders like Kebe Tamu have asked Prime Minister Scott Morrison to come and see the impacts for himself.
It's pretty hard to see weather pattern change in Canberra,
In a statement, the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Ken Wyatt, said the Morrison government is aware of the risks and is helping Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities build their resilience and prepare for the impacts of climate change.
We need to have a clear reality check around what's coming. Areas like the Torres Strait will be further impacted. There's sort of no way around that now, but we can help those communities prepare as best as possible.
We have so much work to do, and every single day that we aren't moving in the right direction, it's just going to make the problems and the challenges that much harder down the road.
What we, humanity, together do over the next 4 to 5 years may well determine the future of humanity for the next few thousand years.
Our home is being attacked by climate change.
Everybody must be aware. It's an emergency.
Upstairs, downstairs, next door.
I want my children, my grandchildren to live here and to experience the life that we experienced growing up.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of that was pretty harsh looking. When they were talking about the water wells that were in the interior of the island, and that because the water had encroached up, now you have ocean water working its way into what had been fresh water, and you can't drink the salt water. And desalinization processes are very, very, very expensive. Most countries cannot afford to use them. The ones that we see using the desalinization process are the oil-rich countries in the Middle East. They use the desalinization process. Again, though, then you're taking ocean water and you're taking the salt out so you can make it drinkable, but now you're pulling ocean water. So the question that we have is, what can be done to help these regions? Was there anything that you heard in the video or anything that you saw on the page from the link that we could add to this? Remember, it's got to be a 5 to 8 sentence paragraph minimum. And using a quote as one of your sentences that takes up 4 or 5 lines does not make it a paragraph, guys. Does anybody have anything? I'm not going to type on this one. I need you guys to give me something here. We've got about 8 minutes left in class. I'm hoping you guys are typing in the chat. Okay, so in that region, they can work on growing their own fruits and vegetables. How would that help the region? And like, what area are you thinking? Okay. But But like you need to, what do you mean by runoff reduction, Ryan? Remember, you can't just throw this in there. You got to explain that, right? So how do we explain this? Growing your own fruits and vegetables will remove greenhouse gases. So you're talking about having plants to utilize the carbon dioxide that's in the air. Okay. They can do things like grow their own fruits and vegetables to help remove okay. All right, it's really hard for me to read these as I'm typing, okay? Utilizing runoff reduction. To push water into the soil using a runoff pipe. Okay. What else? Because we're only at 2 sentences, right? Okay. Recycling. Okay, recycling plastics of all types and not putting them in the landfills. Okay. What do you mean, Jamarcus? So they're going to have to figure out how to clean their water. So utilizing better water filtration. Okay, they can use the damage less severe in the areas they can. Because obviously some of those areas that are, going underwater, I don't think they could use those options, Ryan. So that's why I said in the areas they can, right? What else, guys? So we have recycling plastics, helping to remove greenhouse gases, filtration, structural options, maybe working on reducing their, working on reducing their carbon dioxide emissions can. Okay. And I mean, ultimately, and this is the sad thing. I hate to say this, but I mean, these, with the exception of maybe Australia, because it's a it's an industrialized nation. They have been working very hard on reducing like their carbon dioxide emissions. Most of the island nations don't produce a lot of carbon dioxide because they do a lot of like their transportation tends to be like bicycles and walking. Unfortunately, we have honestly the two largest polluters in the world that have no intention of slowing down, and that's China and India. So until we get them to do what they need to do, it's going to be a lot harder, right? But I think all of these are really good things that they can do. All right, so if you want to come up with your final sentence to conclude this paragraph, you just need to do that and then turn in your journal, which is a summative grade. Okay. And then we are done for the day. It's 10:52. We have 1 minute left in class. Oops, not everything went into the chat. Let me finish putting the last sentence into the chat. All right, so that's in the chat. And that is it for us today. Make sure you finish these up, turn these in, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Adios.
Bye, Adriel.
Adios.